Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I hope I'm not going to have a constant feeling. Good. It's sorted itself out. Welcome, everybody, to Deep Dialogues. I have the most wonderful guest sitting, as you can see, beaming as she is before me, which is always a good auspices. Deep Dialogues, for those of you who are uninformed, my name is Stewart Pearce, and I'm a voice coach and an angelic emissary. And Deep Dialogues was given birth just after COVID because I found myself having remarkable conversations via Zoom with people all over the world, some of whom I knew and had not spoken to for some time, and some new people who emailed me and said, I think it's time to have a chat. And I discovered in our conversations that there was a quality of depth and resonance that was much deeper in the recorded stillness of that period, which some called the lockdown, and I called the big silence, because I felt I was tuning into Divine Mother in the most extraordinary way. My whole life is devoted to the arousal of the divine feminine. So most of my clients are actually ladies, and some of them have been pretty eminent in the world. So we have a wonderful lady here by the name of Heather Ensworth. Wonderful old English name, or indeed American name. And you're based in New England, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. North of Boston.
Just north of Boston. And Heather is a very remarkable lady because she's both an astrologer and a clinical psychotherapist and a number of other things to boot. A seer, an intuitive, and a mythologist. So there are many titles by which this wonderful lady can be announced. However, she's written this book, this extraordinary book, which she's published earlier this year. We're recording in June 2026. And the book is called Astrological Ages and the Galactic Center. And so Heather very kindly said that she would come onto the platform of Deep Dialogues and talk about the book. I want to quote just very briefly a wonderful statement in the foreword that Barbara Hanclau committed herself to. The book, it delivers the long records of time, a data bank that inspired humanity until a few thousand years ago when it was forgotten during the Piscean Age. How do you respond to that?
First of all, Stuart, it's great to be here and be in dialogue with you. Thank you.
Bless you.
And part of what I think Barbara's referring to is that it is remarkable when we look back and really do research into ancient history and come to that awareness that there were so many advanced cultures that we have evidence of, particularly dating back 12,000 years. And we think in our modern Western perspective that we're now at the pinnacle of advancement as humanity and that civilization started 6,000 years ago. And in doing the research for this book, I realized how untrue that actually is. Mm-hmm. That we have signs of these very ancient advanced cultures dating back thousands of years, and that we go through these cycles of evolution of consciousness, and that we're actually now coming out of a 5,000 period of being at a lower level of consciousness. So it's really a wake-up call for us as humanity.
Yeah. And in this wake-up call, we know that there are many excavations that are taking place, often revealed through their own impetus to emerge at this time of awakening, this time of remembering. What's interesting is that many of them were either lost through the perpetration of the patriarchal powers at that time, or disappeared through natural disaster, which, of course, they were supposed to be subsumed as a result of the mysteries that they held. And in the book, you're very detailed about the major influences that you feel these sacred sites or sacred cultures brought forth. And I wonder if there was one that was particularly resonant in your consciousness or that thrilled you in some way, culture or sacred site or indeed civilizational merit?
I am very fascinated with ancient Egypt, both because I have a strong sense that I have a past life in ancient times in ancient Egypt, but also the sacred temples there and the Great Pyramid in particular is so encoded with wisdom and information about the time that it was built, which I really believe was in the age of Leo, 12,000 years ago, and it's encoded with information for us in this time. So it's one of those sites, in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey is another one that absolutely fascinates me. They're encoded with information about this 24,000 year precessional cycle. I believe because they realized they were moving into the descending cycle, that we would at this point in the cycle forget that ancient wisdom. And yet we're at this really critical crisis point in the precessional cycle, the ending of one and the beginning of another one. And it's at these 12,000 year periods that we face huge shifts in our consciousness and massive earth changes. The Younger Dryas cataclysmic crisis was 12,000 years ago. So I think that some of those sites were built after that crisis to alert us we're in a critical time now and a critical choice point.
Beautifully put. And I'm reminded of the awakening of the harmonic convergence in 87, which was when I formally woke. I saw as a child, I'm very aware of the multidimensional universe, but for all sorts of complex reasons, became sleeping until that point where a series of life processes took place, quite harrowed to shift my consciousness. And then, indeed, huge opportunities opened for me. But in 87, I received the divine transmission from these 12 angels that I work with who call themselves the Angels of Atlantis. However, the point that I wanted to move to is the fact that, of course, that harmonic convergence was very crucial from the astrological knowledge of the Mayan people, who spoke of 144,000 rainbow light warriors that would be awoken at that time to prepare the cycles that we've been through, which, of course, you so brilliantly speak about leading up to 2032. And that level of record is so inestimable in its awesomeness, in its wonder, that, again, just tuning into what you've shared with us, that many of those other records that were mysteriously buried into a state of what I refer to as being unremembered rather than forgotten, because surface is forgotten, but we know that there's a reason for why they needed to be, as it were, hidden, or at least they became sub rosa, in the way that so many of the great teachings of Isis were sub rosa for many years. And that whole medieval tradition appeared where many of the rituals were remembered, but were always remembered underneath the rose, sub rosa, rather than in the public domain or the public arena, for the reasons, of course, that are pretty obvious, that they would have been denigrated and so on and so forth, and that women would have lost their lives, as indeed they did. So when we go back into Egypt, there is a great awakening at this time. And I wonder if you have any comments on the information that's been discovered by those two extraordinary Italian scientists with their radar about the wars of Amenti.
It really is remarkable that we are discovering more and more. And I think there is a reason that some of these ancient sites and some of what's been beneath the surface are coming into our consciousness now. I think it is a part of our remembering and beginning to see again who we truly are and what our history has been as humanity. But I strongly believe there are structures all under the Giza plateau beyond our wildest imagination, and that is only beginning to be discovered and explored. And I think that's true. We're finding sites in different parts of the globe that have been hidden, either under the rainforest in Brazil and other areas, or in Peru. So I think more and more, and Uranus is in Gemini, now squaring the lunar nodes, and I think that's bringing disclosure of all kinds into our consciousness to help us see more clearly what our history has been and how critical this time is that we're in right now.
And with this in mind, what do you feel are the principal merits that we can bear in mind, those of us that are awakening through the spiritual community of the planet? What are the principal merits that we need to be informed by from the ancient cultural arousal that's taking place through the wonderful works by people like yourself? What are the chief merits? What do we most need to learn?
Well, circling back to what you were saying about the harmonic convergence, I remember at that time, and this is in other Native American traditions as well, they talked about the movement then with the harmonic convergence into a period of purification in preparation for this movement into higher consciousness. And I believe that part of how we got caught in this period of the last 5,000 to 6,000 years of our lowest level of consciousness was activated by trauma. And so I believe we've been caught in generational trauma, particularly since around 3000 BCE. And I can go into more depth with what was going on at that time. But the critical theme is that we got caught in trauma that led to coping mechanisms around survival, which I think led us to that philosophy of survival of the fittest, conquer or be conquered, and led to war, led to violence, led to our illusion of separation. And a critical part of what we're needing to do now, individually and collectively, is heal. Is see consciously how we've gotten caught in these destructive patterns and the power over paradigms of the patriarchal period that's really only been in this last 5,000 years. That is not our natural way of being as humanity. So when we can see how we've gotten out of balance, actively heal that, then we can open to the energies that are guiding us into higher consciousness. And I also think there's a critical piece of that is shifting from our idealization of the mind, and particularly left brain ways of thinking. And again, we were only left brain dominant in this last 5,000 year period, particularly as we moved into the age of Aries around 2000 BCE. Prior to that, we were right brain dominant. And I think as we're now moving into the age of Aquarius, we will be balancing more fully our left brain, right brain ways of being. But we need to move from that idealization of our minds that leads to an illusion of separation back into our hearts. And it's through our hearts that we can open to cosmic consciousness and open to this spiritual expansion and remember our interconnectedness with all of the sacredness of the life around us and with each other and the cosmos. But I think we need to really work through that healing process to be able to transform, to be able to move into higher consciousness.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I was hoping that you would mention the heart and how the route through, so that we rebalance these two hemispheres and move more into right brain, is through the portal of the heart, and how the heart experiences oneness in a way that the chatter in these two hemispheres has great difficulty, particularly as it's so overridden by the ego. And so are there any particular practices that you have considered dear to yourself, or indeed to the people who come to you, the people that are part of your own specific community, of awakening the heart?
I've done a lot of training in shamanic practices, and in particular find the medicine wheel to be incredibly valuable because it is such an ancient mystical practice. It's at the root of every religious tradition. It's a way of orienting to our connection to the earth, because I think we need a spirituality that is immanent as well as transcendent. And that's also something we've been caught in more recent times, is this notion of spirituality or religion as transcendent, which leads to the devaluation of our material experience and of the earth and the natural world. So as we come back into balance and remember that everything around us is sacred, the medicine wheel supports us in that, supports us in a journey that is about this realization with the medicine wheel that we are all the facets of who we are in this experience. But ultimately, when you come to the center of the medicine wheel, you realize your deep connection with the earth and sky and align with your heart, your center chakra, and with that awareness that you're a soul self having this human experience, that we can honor all these facets of ourselves and our experiences, but we are not our stories. And we are this spiritual being having this human experience. And then we are very much aligned with our hearts and able to be in that stillness and that connection with our soul self that opens us up to the oneness of all that is. And a dear friend once said, you can't come into unity consciousness through the brain, because the brain has two hemispheres that are constantly in communication with each other. It's only through the heart we can come back to unity consciousness.
I completely cohere, by the way, because all of my work is about opening the heart. Hence, within the sound healership or within my voice coaching, because they both interweave with one another, it's about finding that we each have a note, and that the note that we have is right in our hearts, which is why one of the reasons I believe why Rumi committed himself to, if words arise from the heart, they enter the heart. If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. And so much of our world, as you know, is cerebralized, and it's moving really, really fast, and it's all up here. And so one of my great revolutions of consciousness in the world, my offering, my gift, is to really get people into the center of the wheel, as you put it, into the 0 point of our heart, so that we feel the transection between the North Pole and the South Pole, so that we can feel we can feel all of those gradients coming into real center. And it seems to me that we speak at a very unique time, wouldn't that be the case, post the summer solstice, as we begin to look into the next great festival of the Lionsgate portal, when, as we both know, Sirius is reigning supreme over the plateau of Giza, and how Sirius has this beautiful effect on our lives as the spiritual sun, as the spiritual star, and that if we can contain Sirius within our hearts at this time. I love the images that I see of Sirius when I see this beautiful vector moving north, south, east, west. If we can hold Sirius in our hearts, then we're onto something which is immensely meaningful.
Well, especially since I very strongly believe that Sirius is our binary star, and that it is our dance with Sirius that guides us through this precessional cycle. And as I'm sure you know, Sirius is very associated with Isis, the Great Mother, who, and the story of Isis and Osiris is the story of precession.
Yeah.
And Sirius, Isis, does guide us through this journey of our evolution of consciousness. And when we get out of balance and we get caught in crisis, she heals us, she restores us, she revives us. She comes to resurrect us. So I feel like this is the time that we're in, and the energies are there to support us, loving us, guiding us. I more and more am just stunned with the synchronicities of the earth and her transformation and the cosmos and the messages that we're getting.
Mm.
They're so supporting us to wake up, to heal, to transform, to open to these energies coming to us from the cosmos, to guide us in this time to make an evolutionary leap as humanity. We just have to open to those energies and allow ourselves to be in this process of healing and transformation.
Beautiful. And a thought comes to me about the 14 parts of Osiris that were cut up by Set, as we know, and then, of course, her travail initially, and then her pilgrimage, her search for the 14 parts. And, of course, as we know, she found 13, and the 14th she was highly imaginative about. And I'm relating to what you were saying about the ancient civilizations and their locations upon the planet, and obviously the geology of our planet has changed radically over particularly over the last 15,000 years, has changed radically with the end times of Atlantis, with the appearance of the comet that evidently shifted the polar axis quite severely, and then of course the ice age and da 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 da. And we know that there are documented reports of Egyptian priests speaking to Plato about the nature of the way that they had seen or that they had written about the great shifts that had taken place on the planet. I'm not going to bastardize the quote by paraphrasing because it's very exquisite. However, the 14 parts, I'm very involved in the resurrection of Osiris, as indeed in the hopeful initiation of the priestesses of Isis, where so many women are, wonderful, wonderful women are waking up to the fact that they have deep memory about the fact that they served in the temples in Egypt and possibly before that in Atlantis. And so as it so happened that I was running a retreat in Egypt, which I've been running retreats there for the last 25 years, and have been a pilgrim there for 57 years. And the retreat that I was running just as COVID broke was called, or opened, was called The Priestesses of Isis. And then suddenly there was this information, you need to leave, the gates are closing. Fortunately, we were on the last plane out of Cairo, so I was able to get everybody home. And then, of course, as we know, something happened. However, these 14 parts of Osiris, the locations within the principality, as it were, of Kemet, we can be very defined about the possibility of where those regions were that have turned into the governorates of the contemporary part of Egypt. But I wonder, actually, if they were really the major sites that we're speaking of.
I actually think, because again, I believe that whole story is about the precessional cycle. I actually believe that the 14 relates to the 12 constellations of the zodiac,
Right.
and then the other 2 constellations that are also on the zodiac, but I don't see them as part of our solar or personal journey through the signs of the zodiac. But we have Orion and Ophiuchus that I believe are cosmic markers. And Orion, as the constellation, is associated with Osiris. And the struggle of Osiris with his brother Set, whose name means being caught in time and disorder. So it is about our getting caught in trauma, conflict with each other, getting pulled into these destructive patterns that tear us apart. And Isis continually comes back to heal and revive Osiris. And in that final part of the story, where she's gathering the 14 pieces, I believe it's reconnecting all of those 14 constellations. And opposite Orion, representing Osiris, is Ophiuchus, which is the serpent bearer holding the serpent which is such a profound image of the integration of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. The serpent is our oldest known image of the great goddess. So the story is basically she's gathering the 14 pieces to bring us back into wholeness, to help us remember this cycle that we move through, but to be revived and be restored. And part of what's fascinating to me is in the story when she revives and resurrects Osiris, who's died, she changes shape and becomes a kite hawk. And in her bird form, she is flapping her wings and breathing the breath of life into him and bringing him back to life. And what's extraordinary is for the ancient Egyptians, the constellation Cygnus, which flies along the Milky Way, was seen as the kite hawk. So it's associated with Isis in her form resurrecting us. It is this constellation that was not only seen as the kite hawk, but the soul self, the Ba, for ancient Egyptians. But what's even more extraordinary, Stewart, is that there's a lot of indication from work done by Andrew Collins in the Cygnus mystery that the binary microquasar in the stars of Cygnus was active at the time of our making an evolutionary leap into the Golden Age, the Satya Yuga, about 16,000 BCE. That microquasar has reactivated now.
Wow.
It's literally as if Isis activated in her bird form as the kite hawk is resurrecting us if we open to those energies. But Andrew Collins believes that those energies coming from that binary microquasar activate our pineal glands, transmute our DNA, and are what led to that radical shift into the Golden Age. And I believe we're in this critical karmic choice point as humanity where we now can move into a Golden Age and become, as the Peruvian shamans would say, homo luminous ones, beings of light and love. If we open to these energies that are activated, that are calling us into this transformation.
Brilliant. I'm absolutely fascinated by what you've shared with us. And I see the route to another book.
Because unfortunately, that piece did not really come into play until after the book was published. But I think it's so extraordinary. The Galactic Center has reactivated as of 2024.
Yeah.
Those energies, and the Galactic Center is known as our second sun.
Yeah.
So we're getting cosmic energies from the Galactic Center, now from Cygnus, the microquasar Sig X3, from these solar energies that are coming to us. We are so bathed in energies calling us into this time of higher consciousness.
Absolutely fascinating. But my dear Heather, I'm highly curious. The major question has always been why. And I'm a profound dyslexic and synesthete, so I found academia, or that route, very, very challenging as a child. Couldn't read before the age of 14. Read through singing when I discovered that was the route through, because my synesthesia is that I see sound. And I was trying to find a way of delivering all of this and making sense of it, whilst also developing a 3D relationship, which was not altogether easy for me. However, I'm highly curious and investigate a tremendous amount, and through the bounty and the beauty of the internet, I go searching, and I've been looking for a seed of the extraordinary paradigm that you've just offered us for a long time, and I've never heard anybody articulate it in the way that you have. And
Mm.
I've looked into countless references and resources to do with the Orion mystery, to do with the Sirius exploration of the real significance of Sirius, etc., etc. And with some of the wonderful people that are awakening at this time, who are new to the arena, but are also speaking in the most voluble ways, in the most considered ways, in the most researchful ways. And I haven't heard anybody articulate it as beautifully as you have just done.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
say to you, I feel that that's highly innovative and totally apposite for what we're experiencing right now, as we see the way that we've met. And here we are in this particular period of time, and here you are saying all of this. So I find that really ravishing. Wow, where did this all begin for you? The balance of this curious mythological aspiration within your own intelligence, the clinical psychotherapist, and also astrology. How did it all develop?
The interest in ancient mythology and this exploration of ancient history started for me by traveling to ancient sacred sites and witnessing and experiencing the sophistication and the level of understanding of astronomy, of mathematics, of healing energies that were so palpably clear at these ancient sites. And then beginning to realize our whole understanding of history in modern Western culture is not accurate. So it led me into a deeper dive, but I also then discovered Hamlet's Mill and that book that looks at how the ancient myths were so often describing planetary cycles or the movement of the stars because the ancient cultures were so in tune with these larger cycles. So it just led me into a deeper exploration of that. But all of that came after a critical mystical experience that I had when I was in practice in California on the path of being a clinical psychologist and experienced this voice that said very clearly to me, you need to leave your life as you've known it or you will die. And I knew with every fiber of my being that was true. And so it led me to my own transformational process of dismantling my life as I'd known it on every level, being in the liminal time, which, and prior to going into clinical psychology, I had been studying cultural anthropology. So that was of interest to me. But here I was in my own rite of passage. And in that liminal time of not having a clue, okay, I'm left my life behind, thinking, oh, something will just open up and then I'll find the new form. But no, I went through a period of years of not knowing, being in the mystery. And so I would just follow the breadcrumbs, follow these synchronicities that would guide me to the next thing. And I was in a workshop on women's spirituality with Vicki Noble, who said, well, I'll offer an astrology reading to anyone who's interested. And coming from my background, I thought, well, that's astrology's ludicrous, but I will just explore this. And when she looked at this chart and was able to describe things about me and my life that even my therapist wouldn't know, I thought there's something to this. And that started me on my deep dive into astrology, and I've never stopped since. And then it became so clear to me. Astrology was not, and Carl Jung was deeply immersed in astrology. It's such a powerful tool for those of us doing therapeutic work or healing work, but also to me, then it just opened up this way of understanding. It is so connected with those hermetic principles, as above, so below, as it is within us, so it is outside of us. As it is outside of us, so it is within us. And I started to realize everything is interconnected. And then it's just been my fascination and love ever since.
Bless you. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That's remarkable. Two observations that are keen in my mind: the way that these aspects, these facets of your soul, were awakened, and also you spoke about being lustrous within the great mystery. And the way you spoke of it was immensely wisely and very deeply lovingly. It seems that the Divine Mother was holding you in that space of not knowingness. And the impression that I gained as you spoke it, just on a feeling level, on a deep, deep feeling level, was that you trusted that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking particularly about many of our brothers and sisters around the planet at this time are also experiencing, I don't know what's going on. And obviously, we're in a cusp between the old and the new, the old paradigm, the new paradigm. And often, as we know, life gets hold of us and shakes us so that we actually have to reorientate ourselves. We have to re-navigate. But there is that extraordinary period, as you and I both know, which is, of course, the fertile void, as we know from a classical psychotherapeutic point of view, is referred to, but can be extremely uneasy for many people because we're no longer doing, we're being, and then there is the concern or the worry about, well, where's the money coming from, etc., etc. And you said it went on for a number of years while the reorientation process, the reallocation process was taking place. As you reflect on that time, are there any beautiful words of wisdom or wonderful potions, sort of emotional potions or elixirs that you can give us for those people that may be moving through it?
Tied in with what you're saying, Stuart, I believe when we get that guidance from spirit, or the guidance from our soul self, you feel it, you know it. It isn't a mental thought, it's a deep knowing. So when I had that mystical experience, I knew that was true. And here I was dismantling my life, and I had very successful practice. I had a home, I had established myself, and people thought I was crazy.
Mm.
And yet there was this deep trust. This is exactly what I'm being guided to do at the soul level. But at the same time, and I think this is important for people to understand, when you're like the caterpillar going into the chrysalis, awaiting, you don't know that you're going to become the butterfly. You don't know what's on the other side of that fertile void. And everything dissolves. Your whole sense of identity dissolves. And there were times where I would wake up in panic in the middle of the night. What am I doing? Where am I going? How am I going to make a living? And there were years where I was struggling with how to make ends meet. But I did trust and know at the same time, this is exactly where I'm meant to be. And as I came out of that journey to the underworld and then returned transformed, all the pieces of what I had experienced that seemed so random as I was going through that transition time were all part of the mosaic of what came together for the new form. So being able to, and to me, but that's part of the beautiful meaning of the practice of the medicine wheel, which I learned early in this journey of being in the not knowing, is that when you come to center, you're able to hold being in the mystery. And it is about being, not doing. And it is about really aligning with the earth and sky and your heart and your soul self to trust that you are held and you are guided by these energies beyond ourselves, and that it can calm the mind and calm the personality self that understandably has its freak out moments, because none of this would make sense in the cultural conditioning that we have grown up with.
What's so exquisite about the way you describe this is that you alluded to the fact that the awakening can possibly be two things. One is inspirational, one is through desperation. the awakening takes place, and whatever the force is that awakens us, we begin to realize that something very remarkable is going on. But as you were saying, we just aren't forming very clearly what the vision of the future is all about. For you, you turned inwards into that inherent trust.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you probably had mythological identities or archetypal identities that you associated with, for example, the Great Mother. Um, Many people, as we know, are so separated from Source that as they move through that transcendental process, that they're not seeing clearly how they can always turn to the Great Father, the Great Mother, the Divine Mother, Father, God, Source. And I wonder if there was anything that you specifically have used that got you through. I was thinking, for example, about as you were measuring the journey for yourself, that one of the great forces that happens with me, because I have this temperament that tends to burst forth in its either in its wonder or in its depths, and often becomes displaced in time. And one of the elements that has always helped me is all conditions are temporary, including life itself.
Mm.
Are temporary, so that we move from this linear perspective into something which is much more spiraled and cyclic, and therefore align ourselves with what you so beautifully described earlier in our dialogue about connecting with the archetypal forces of these immense cosmological periods. For example, the precession of the equinoxes. Were there any particular skills or, those momentary grabbing hold of an essential belief that is not a thought, is not an idea, it's actually something that is very meaningful and purposeful?
I do want to talk about that, but just to follow up on some of what you're saying, Stuart, that I think is so important is all the ancient mystery school traditions and shamanic traditions were about how do we move beyond the fear of death. Because when we do realize we're a soul self having this human experience, we're a part of infinity, then you're not afraid of the little deaths
Mm.
and transitions and times of transformation. But we're in a culture that's terrified of death. And I think that's the trauma that happened around 3000 BCE with some climate crisis and earth changes. I think we got caught in fear of death.
Mm.
And that's part of what's spun us so out of balance. And when you're afraid of something and you haven't healed that and cleared that, you actually draw the very thing to yourself that you fear. And we've become a culture of destruction, dealing death and war and violence around the globe. But back to the guidance, I've had a deep connection with spirit my entire life, and that held me through it. And I do have a deep connection to the Great Mother and to Isis in particular.
Mm.
But part of what was very powerful for me, and I think it's tragic that we don't have, like indigenous cultures have, this rite of passage in adolescence, where we honor the biological parents who've given us life, but open to our connection to the Great Mother, the Great Father, our animal and spirit guides and plant allies, so that we know we are held and supported by these energies beyond us. But in the midst of my transition time, I had been studying with a Mohawk medicine woman. I had been connecting to my own animal allies and plant allies, but I would have these synchronistic experiences. Like during one very dark night of the soul period, where I thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. For about 8 days in a row, a barred owl would literally appear. I'd be walking in the woods. There would be a barred owl on a low branch of a tree staring at me. And it would just stay there for as long as I stood there staring eye to eye. Or one time I came back from a walk midday, and there was a barred owl sitting in the middle of the day in my backyard. And it was so clear to me, the message I was being given is there's wisdom in the times of darkness, and you are in a time of transformation. Trust. And I had other experiences like that. I had an experience with a plant ally that radically changed my life. It helped me realize we're not only held by these energies of spirit, of the great mother, of the great father, we are held and guided by the energies that then manifest in the sacredness and consciousness of the life around us. And those synchronicities were such tangible reminders.
Hmm.
You are loved, you are held, you are not alone. That were really critical to me through that transition time.
Wow, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I share with you, I have a parallel because of working with a Native American elder of the Tewa in New Mexico in the beginning of the 90s. One of the things that the angels promised me in 87 was that because, like a lovesick teenager, I wanted to start teaching the transmissions that they were giving me, and particularly about sound. And they said, no, you will not. You will not for at least 20 years. We're going to prepare you. What is that preparation? Well, when the student is ready, the masters will come. And so indeed, over the period of time, 3 masters came, not consecutively, but they came, and one was a Native American elder in New Mexico. And going through the transition that I was going through, there was a very, very deep emotional process that I needed to sort out. And of course, it was triggered by a significant relationship coming to an end. But I do remember being returned to the prophecy of what the medicine wheel had revealed to me all that way back. And there I was standing on the mesa outside the adobe where I was staying in the middle of the mesa. We were very isolated, far from Santa Fe. And it was the middle of the night, it was a full moon, and it was very warm, it was summertime, so I knew nobody was around. I just walked naked from the adobe into the desert and saw what I thought was an apparition. Now, I've been seeing preternatural or supernatural processes all my life, but here I was thinking, is this an illusion? And actually this being walked towards me, and it was White Buffalo Calf Woman, sharing such love. It was very extraordinary. And as soon as that love had been received from her, and I was nourished and immensely full of great gratitude for her extraordinary administration, a hummingbird came and flew in front of my face, right here, and disappeared. And then another hummingbird came and disappeared. And then another came. Where would you find a hummingbird in the middle of the night? It was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, flying through the mesa to give people greetings. Anyway, so the signs come that we are okay. And for those people who are going through the bitter, long dark night of the soul, many of these stories may appear to be fanciful to you because you're still going through the undertow of that deep chasm, which seems to be bottomless, and indeed it is. The point is that these identities that we're sharing with you are inspirational to give you a sign that there is a transcendental pathway out of the challenge. But to begin with, we have to go through the challenge. We have to go through the fire and examine what that rite of passage is all about. And therefore we become more embodied. And the curious thing, as you were saying earlier, as we become more embodied, we really become deeply involved with the whole of our physical sensation process and our sensoriness and our sexuality and so on and so forth. But what's also extraordinary is that then we're gifted with pathways of such extraordinary supernal transcendentalism, where we start receiving elixir, where we start receiving cosmic milk from the universe that nourishes us and becomes absolutely real in the fascination of what its bounty and beauty is all about. I can see that you know exactly where I'm at with this.
Absolutely. And it does mean taking that step of trust and being willing to be in the void and to go through that. But it's trusting that the underworld journey or the time of transformation, it's disorienting, but it is an alchemical process that's calling us into a new form to be more empowered in the true gold of who we truly are. And we're gifted then with these ways in which we are guided and shown that we're supported in that journey. And I love that you talked about the hummingbird, because as I was dismantling my practice, selling my home, going through that whole transition in California, again, with periods of anxiety, like, what in the world am I doing and where am I going? Every time I would be overwhelmed and would go out into my little tiny garden behind my house, this female hummingbird would come and hover right in front of me. And it was such a sign of being held and guided. And the day that I actually left to drive east, she came one last time, hovered right in front of me, and flew due east. And I didn't know till years later that, at least for the Peruvian shamans, the hummingbird is about follow your path of destiny with joy and sip of the sweetness of life. So there are so many layers of meaning to that encounter and visitation, but it's such a sign that we are guided by those synchronicities, by those signs from spirit, that we're not alone, that we are being held and supported, even in a time of overwhelm, when we feel like we're in that chrysalis and everything is dissolving.
So there's a great meeting point, isn't there, with the early part of our conversation about the rich cosmology that you're tapping into, and indeed is literally oozing in a very beautiful way from this extraordinary book that you've, just to remind everybody, Astrological Ages and the Galactic Center. We'll make sure that it's actually listed underneath this wonderful dialogue. You're reminding us so copiously of the wonderful bounty of nature, and how there are many signs. There's the literal and also the metaphoric within nature, and how the signs will come to us if we can just simply be still and ready to receive, so that we're in a mode of supplication. And the signs are becoming so piquant, becoming so poignant, it seems, at this time, with the richness of the heavens opening, that Mother Earth is also beginning to emerge, whether it be through the pathway of shamanism or animism in general, that we're beginning to be encouraged to be within nature, to feel the flow of Mother Earth, providing us both in terms of the watercourses and our own breath, how we can literally be part of her magnificence, and therefore to heal on a much more profound level. I wonder if there was any specific insights that you had about the meeting of the cosmology and the way that, for example, all the elemental kingdom is opening, which has always been very alive to me, and when I was a child, and still is. So I spend a lot of time in nature, speaking with the fae and talking with the trees. But I went through a huge turning in 2010, which of course was pronounced in the astrology of my birth chart, where I had to leave behind everything that I'd worked for nearly 37 years. And it was, as it were, the zenith of my career in established voice coaching. And it was the fact that I was responsible for, in a team, of course, not just me alone, that I was responsible for the creation or the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. And it got to a point where I just simply had to leave, because the forces that had, the original administration had changed quite radically. People had left, and then a dark force came in that evidently indicated to me that I was no longer welcome, even though I'd been there for many years. A grandfather horse chestnut tree gave me counsel every morning and every evening. And the wisdom of this tree, which I understood from the gardener, because I was living in one of London's squares, Georgian squares, and here was this wonderful garden with this horse chestnut right in the middle of it. So I spoke one morning. I was there at 7 o'clock one morning talking to this tree, and this voice said to me, "So you hear the tree, do you?" And it was the gardener. And I said, "How old is this tree?" And he said, "Oh, 350, 400 years. We've read the rings." This wisdom that poured out. And of course, for me, that was just so extraordinary, because of being the Shakespeare scholar and going back into all of the work that I did within the embodiment of classical theatre. And of course, opening the Globe was an extraordinary experience, because it's steeped in mystery. whether it be the location on which it was built or indeed the sacred geometry of its architecture, and this unique relationship between audience and actors, because the actors can see their audience, which of course, as we know, in blackened theatre, they don't. However, I wonder if there was any wonderful observations that you could share with us about what you're seeing so beautifully and so intelligently about the movement of cosmology and the awakening of the great cosmic cycles and the elemental kingdom. Anything that came to your mind?
Well, it's interesting too, Stuart, that you and I have gotten into this whole conversation about what does it mean to be going through these times of profound transformation personally, because we are at that time collectively.
Mm.
That is what we're all experiencing now as we're in this liminal time, called into this time of healing and transformation to make this evolutionary leap. And I do believe that part of what's happening is we are being called back into balance with the energies of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. And we tend to project out the sacred masculine to be the transcendent energy.
Mm.
And the sacred feminine is the embodiment of the sacredness all around us.
Mm.
So as the sacred feminine wisdom is rising to come back into balance with the sacred masculine energy, we are returning to our connections to the elementals and the sacred consciousness of the plants and animals and being guided by the cosmos. And I find it absolutely fascinating, the synchronicity of 3i Atlas coming to make a pass by Mars, October 2025, then Venus, November, then Jupiter in March of 2026, trying to rebalance the energies of the masculine, the sacred masculine, Mars, sacred feminine, Venus, our belief systems, our faith, our trust, Jupiter. And now, in an amazing synchronicity, the outermost planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, are all in this synchronicity with each other.
Mm.
So that if they're activating a planet in our chart, they're all sequentially activating that planet to bring these transformational energies to bear. And June and July, in our experience of the transits, Venus gets activated, then Mars, then Jupiter, by those three outermost transpersonal planets. So it's as if the cosmos keeps saying, okay, you had round one, 3i Atlas came to help you correct and bring those energies within ourselves and collectively back into balance. Now you get another run through of support to do that. But I think that's such a critical piece of this.
Yeah. I see it clearly. Thank you for that. That's beautiful. And I'm reminded also, as I was just reflecting on the project that I've not been part of for now 16 years, the creation of Shakespeare's Globe, the two pillars that keep the heavens and the earth together are Mars and Venus. So that the experience through the fluidity of all that takes place, the 2 hours traffic of the stage, is the unification of Mars and Venus. Because as we know from the ancient mythology, it brought forth a child called Harmonia. So harmony is actually expressed. The potency of that particular vessel, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, it is not actually awake at the moment with the current administration, because they're not aware, or if they are, it's purely on a cerebral level, but they don't see the credence in what I'm sharing. However, back to this cosmological sequence. This is really beautiful and brings us to an exquisite completion for our conversation, as though, wondrous thought, as though we've been guided all the way through our conversation, through our dialogue. I'm being obviously slightly humorous.
But there's an interesting synchronicity.
And although I wrote all of these wonderful questions on this piece of paper, we've actually answered them in a wonderful, flowing way. Actually, there's one small point that I obviously don't want to tire you because we reached our point of completion, but I'd love if you could to define for us, because it's so quintessential within the book, what you see the Galactic Center as being.
What's so interesting is the theme of the fertile void has come up over and over again in our conversation. And I see the galactic center as the great womb
Mm, mm,
of
mm,
our galaxy. It is the womb of the great goddess from which all of our universe, our galaxy, has been birthed.
mm,
And it is in ancient cultures known as the second sun. And
mm,
when it does activate, it becomes brighter than the sun in the sky. And it is the energy that activates our increase in consciousness.
mm,
So it's so symbolic in so many ways about we're called to come to center within ourselves, which is our heart chakra. We're called into that 0 point, that point of the energy of creativity and love and balance and harmony at the center of the medicine wheel. And the galactic center is the center of our galaxy.
mm, mm,
And it is the place that gives birth to all that is and takes us back at the time of death, and was seen by ancient cultures as where we return. Our souls return at the time of death to be birthed again.
mm.
So it's so profound in so many ways, and it is so significant that as of 2024, it's reactivated.
Mm.
I think is, again, another sign that we're being called into this time of resurrection on the planet.
Bless you. This has been one of the most extraordinary dialogues, and I feel that we're overlit by something which is so hallowed. It's been beautiful. I love your eloquence and the way that you ground mighty concepts into such a fluid and exquisite articulation, so deeply from the bottom of my heart, core of my soul. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that you've been spellbound by this beautiful lady and all that she shared with us. And I will make sure that underneath, my tech team will write underneath all of your website details and, of course, connection with the book. Ah, there we are. You see, Josh has already done it. Thanks, Josh. The Rising Moon Healing Practice. And, oh, that's the Angels of Atlantis. That's me. Wonderful. So email us, comment on this wonderful conversation, those of you who are out there in ether space, and let us know what you've been feeling. And indeed, remember the medicine wheel. Thank you, everybody. Namaste, namaste. Josh, thanks so much.